Thank you.
Good morning.
Hi. I'm Michelle Milne.
And I am Ted Swartz.
Ted is a writer, performer, producer, and chaser of goosebumps. He has a lifelong curiosity around what makes us laugh. Laughter, the spiritual, delicious, social lubricant which proclaims you are safe here. He's a river watcher, storyteller of winding and entertaining tales, secret dancer, and keeper of thoroughly specific baseball numbers and facts. He's written performances with titles like Laughter is Sacred Space, Listening for Grace, and the film No Feeling is Final.
Michelle is a writer, a dancer, a healer, a performer, teller of detailed stories, observer of interesting bugs, lover of cats, director of rare ability, a creative aunt, eager and committed laugher, puzzle solver, collector of quirks, compassionate truth teller, champion of justice, and in all of these, a passionate and curious artist. She has created multiple shows with titles including Traveling Home, The Telling of the Bees, and The Enneagram Project.
The Enneagram Project?
Yes.
I think we're working on that together.
We are.
Aha. Ted has also started a nonprofit, the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul, that highly values edgewalkers.
And Michelle has written a show about her intrigue with edge effects.
Edges. In ecology, positive edge effects are where two habitats intersect, and some of the greatest, richest natural diversity can be found. Negative edge effects occur when artificial edges are imposed, stifling free movement, leading to increased disease and diminishing conditions for healthy life.
And edgewalkers are often people who find themselves on the edges of culture, faith communities, and socio-economic norms. Sometimes they are outcasts. Sometimes they are prophets, and sometimes it's hard to tell the difference.
Sometimes it can feel like we're right on the edge of something.
So what is an edge, anyway?
The edge is the difference between leaping and landing.
Between solid ground and not quite knowing what's beyond the leap.
Suspension.
A conundrum.
The edge is where things change.
The edge is a question.
How will you answer?
The edge is a place where things meet, an opportunity for exchange.
An opportunity for change.
Exchange and change is a question.
Will we shake hands? Will you walk away? Will one of us hurt the other?
The edge can make us stop and take stock.
Choose to leap or choose to recede.
Are we a wall or are we the wind?
The edge is a moment where things could go either way.
The edge is a pause between the inhale and the exhale.
We don't stop breathing entirely, just long enough to rise and release, like the tide.
Not a dichotomy, but all of a whole.
At the border, towns rely on each other. They need the other side to survive.
Neighbors of necessity.
At the edges of my heart, I need all sides to survive. Inside, outside.
Inside out?
Probably.
At the coast, sand transforms into water.
At the edge of my heart, transformation, mine, yours, ours, has a chance. Sand into water.
One town into the next.
Skin into skin.
Life intersects.
Lives intersect.
What really is an edge?
Maybe what we call the edge is actually the middle.
So, from the gospel stories, this was told to me by Eli, who heard it from Sophie, who heard it from Rachel, who heard it from Malachi, who heard it from Helach, who was there. Jesus, he's got to tell another story. It's a parable. The disciples, they asked, what, again with the questions? Again with the parables, you can't just tell us? And Jesus says, you know, people, you hear a discussion, you hear a teaching, the sound goes in here, kicks around, out the other side. Does it stick? No. But a story has roots. It goes in, it sticks, it starts to grow. Yeah, like the good soil. So the parable is this. The kingdom of God, he said, and with him it's always about the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is like a mustard seed. It's small, real small. So Jesus says from this little seed comes a tree big enough for the birds. Now, he didn't say what bird. It could have been a dove, a sparrow. It doesn't matter for the story. What's important is it starts out small, grows to be big. Simple. Big, small. What a surprise. There you go. Are we done? No. You see, with Jesus, it's always never that simple. See, the mustard tree is not very big. Now, he could have chosen a cedar tree, an oak tree. You know what you got there. Sycamore, that's a tree. But no, he went with the mustard tree. Go figure. And they're not very big, see? They're not really even a tree. It's more of a shrub, a bush, and they're not very pretty. Short, scruffy, shows up where you don't want them, like my Uncle Aaron. Now, you think you know where this parable's going, but remember, with Jesus, it's always never that simple. See, mustard, it's good for when you get sick. Yeah, you know, when you got that, you know what I'm talking about here. It's like you got a matzo ball stuck in your throat. What do you do? What do? You take the mustard, you grind it up, you make a paste, you lie it on here, real thick. You probably should lie down for that part. And the phlegm cuts that right up. I'm telling you, it's a miracle drug. And if you got a toothache, you got itching sores, scabs, bad vision, poison from snakes, scorpions, stomachache, asthma, and if you faint, a little up the nose, boom, you're awake. Now, you got all these things happen to you, you got bigger problems. But I'm telling you, the mustard, you got to know where you keep the mustard. And they're real tough to get started. The mustard tree, when you start them over here, they end up over here. They start here, they end up there. How'd that happen? They're pesky, but lovable, like my Uncle Aaron. The mustard seed. The kingdom of God is like a mustard seed.
Mustard seed.
Mustard seed.
Mustard seed.
Mustard
Seed.
seed.
Bees. It took a couple of days to realize that my cousin Zebulun had disappeared. I come from a big hive, and we look out for one another, but we also take care of ourselves. And at any second, a few thousand of us will be out looking for the best place to find our food. This might make it seem like a flipping mess of chaos, but really it's quite organized. We don't do the whole top-down thing, but we follow predictable patterns. Now, Zebulun was one of the strongest workers in the family. He had a knack for finding especially good pastures and relaying the location back to the rest of us. Then he went right back out again. He wasn't the kind to take much of a break between trips. So at first, we thought he was just out on a really thorough scouting. After he disappeared, word got around that he had been acting funny for a few days and hadn't been working as hard. He seemed drained and tired. He'd gotten lost a few times, gotten confused on the directions. Then he flew off and we never saw him again. We usually don't have time to worry about just one of us going missing, but then the same thing started happening over and over again. Solid workers would get tired, nauseous, confused, and then fly off at random directions. Sometimes we found their bodies alone and far from the hive, but usually they just disappeared. We've survived all kinds of things in the past. Winters that lasted for years, floods and droughts. Still, this kind of insanity scared me because it slashed us below our defenses. In times of hardship, we just buckled down, but this one we couldn't figure out. I left because I wasn't sure how long it would be until I got thrown off track too. I decided it would be better to choose where I was going rather than just end up in Antarctica or someplace by accident.
Another story. This one was told to me by Ela, who heard it from Sophie, heard it from Rachel, heard it from Hela, heard it from Malachi, who was there. Now, on this particular trip, it had taken us longer than we thought it was going to. Usually does the travel. Part of the reason was there was this man. Partway into the trip, he appears. He wasn't there, he was there, kaboom. I think he was hiding behind a bush. He was startling to us. He says to us, "What are you talking about?" And we say, "What, you dropped out of the sky? That you don't know about this prophet, the prophet Jesus, the one the priests and the leaders decided needed to die for doing, as far as what we could tell, was too much good." And today's only the third day since he's been gone. The women, they go to the tomb, there's nothing there. Kaboom, what do you think? And this you're telling us you don't know. He says, oh, I might have heard something about that. And then he says, "Do you mind if I come along?" We say the road is free. Actually, it's not free, it belongs to the Romans, but what doesn't? Figure of speech, the road is free. So he comes along. He's listening. We're still talking. He's listening. We're talking. We stop for just a minute, and kaboom, he starts in. It was a history lesson. A history lesson he gave us. Yes. He seemed to know his prophets. From Moses himself through the prophets, the ones we all knew, plus the ones we didn't know, plus the ones according to him we should have known, but we didn't know. What a spiel. But when he spoke, the words, they came out here, and for us, they go in here. They end up here. They stayed right here. So the man who appeared and seemed to know so much about history, he was walking ahead as we got to the next village, and he was going to go on. Now, the next town, you couldn't get there before dark unless you were to run most, if not all the way, and running you shouldn't do, what with the sun was going down. And to be honest, we didn't see that happening, what with his limp and all. And the sandals he was wearing, they had seen better days and nights, to be honest. So we said, stay with us. And so he did. He stayed, not being foolish, and what with the limp and the sandals and all. So that evening we had a nice nosh. We had a meal, a little cheese, a little fish, and we had some bread. And he says to us, "May I bless the bread?" We said, "Sure, since you seem to know so much about the prophets." So he took the bread. He blessed the bread. He broke the bread. Such a stinker. It was him. The whole time. It was him, what with the prophets and the limp and the bread. Such a stinker. So, 2 days later, we're having a discussion amongst ourselves about you know who, and there he is. Boom, he shows up. Kaboom. He says to us, "Peace, shalom." He's got to know, right? Peace is not the first thing that we think about when what we think is a ghost shows up, kaboom. He says, "Why? Why are you frightened?" He was serious. So then he says, "Maybe you should look at the feet. Maybe you should look at the hands." We weren't sure we wanted to look, but we had to, Oy, such a mess. Such a mess. But believe we did. And now there's a commotion, a lot of us talking all at the same time. He's trying to get our attention, but it's again with the, "Oh, you hear? How's that possible?" And we apologize again for not believing, and who could blame us? And he says to us, "Hey, do you have anything to eat? Do you have anything to eat?" Such a stinker.
Do you have anything to eat?
Something to eat.
Something to eat. Bees.
Bees, edges.
The effects of edges.
Edges.
Wandering.
Looking for your neighbor.
I come to the desert to be lonely.
The sand and the sun, a cactus so soft I want to pet it.
Tumbleweeds tumble, and I think of following one.
And I know there are invisible journeys.
Bones left dry. Kids clinging and wondering as their mothers trace paths to find their husbands.
I know there's a strong fight here, walls made with arms entwined, trying to stop returns across the wall.
Counting the deaths, planting crosses.
I know people climb over that wall and slide down and hope for freedom.
I know some of them are surprised that the desert continues on the other side.
I am surprised too.
I come here for nourishment. Why would I go to a place with no water for nourishment?
It's a place where things hold water.
It's a place of survival.
A place where dangerous things are beautiful.
A complicated place with secrets.
I go into the desert expecting a reprieve, a release, a sigh.
But that sigh is distant, just out of reach.
I come here to find those spaces in myself that get filled too full in other places.
Here, there's no ocean, no dense forest, no winding creeks, no skyscrapers.
No patter of small-town gossip.
Just me and the sky and the sand. Just me and the thorns. The beautiful thorns.
Everything can drain out of me until the essentials are all that's left.
Here, I have to deal with myself.
So this was told to be by Eli, heard it from Sophie, heard it from Rachel, heard it from Hela, who heard it from Malachi, who was there. Now, Jesus again is traveling with the disciples, all right? They find this man along the road. He's a blind man. So the disciples, they got to ask a question. Good way to learn. Ask a question. "Teacher," they asked, "who sinned here, the blind man or his family, that he was born blind. Apparently, for some, a perceived infirmity was an indication of sin. Sin, like coveting or murder, stealing, not honoring your mother, God rest her soul. Sin, like blindness. So Jesus says, what are you, crazy? What kind of thinking is that? What, your parents sinned? You should ask such a question? All right, he didn't actually say that. But he was thinking it. Jesus says, neither. This happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. And while I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And then Jesus, he spits in the dirt. He makes some mud. First, he says, I am the light of the world. Then he spits. Bit of a dichotomy, I think. Light of the world. He was an earthy man. So he spits, he makes mud, he puts it on the man's eyes. Then he says, go wash in the pool of Siloam. So the man, he goes, he washes, he comes home, he can see. He can see. I am the light, spit, mud, wash, he can see. Ha! So the people who knew the man from the begging and such, they say, hang on, just a minute. There's something familiar about this man, the man with the clean face and the eyes that see. It could be because there's a resemblance. Couldn't be him. Couldn't be him. But the man with the clean face and the eyes that see, he says, it's me. It's me. What with the eyes that see? So the people who said, hang on, they say to him, how is this possible to be seeing? And the man says, the one called Jesus, because that's his name, he spits on the ground, made some mud on the eyes. He says, go to Siloam and wash. Wash, on account of the mud. So I go, I wash on account of the mud, and kaboom, I can see. The people ask, where is this man? The one called Jesus, on account of that was his name. The man says, I don't know. I didn't see him. On account of the mud on the eyes. Bit of a comedian, the man. So the people who seem to be taking a real interest for the first time in his life, they take him to the Pharisees. Ooh, always a dubious journey, the trip to the Pharisees. Because, and this is the kicker here, the spit, the mud, the go wash, all on the Sabbath. See, Jesus, he had to know it was going to come to this. The spit, the mud, the wash, the trip to the Pharisees, he knew it was the Sabbath. He had a good inner calendar, Jesus did. So the Pharisees, they say, how is it that you, a man who was a beggar, can now see? So then he tells them all about the spit, the mud, the washing, kaboom, the seeing. And the Pharisees say, this man is not from God. But they were reminded again of the spit, the mud, the seeing, but they seem to miss this salient point, this salient, salivant point. Yeah, the spit. And they say, this man is not from God. He does not keep the Sabbath. But other people, they say, if he's a sinner, what about the spit, the mud, and the seeing? It was a conundrum. Something good happens on the wrong day of the week. A conundrum. So they turn to the resident expert, the previously to this point blind, possibly sinful beggar. And they say, it was you, what with the spit, the mud, and the seeing. What do you say about him? And he said, oh, you mean the man who saw my blindness? The lack of respect, the lack of career, the lack of hope, the one who gave me all these things? This man? They said, yeah, that's the guy. He said, he's a prophet. And so that ended the conundrum. You really didn't think that was going to happen, right? I mean, these were religious folks, remember? Church folk. They didn't believe him. They call for the man's parents. They say, this is your son. Is this your son, the one who was born blind, possibly on account of your sin? How is it that he can now see? And they say, well, he is our son who can now see, and yes, he was born blind, but why he can see or who enabled this to happen, we don't know. It was a conundrum. But they did know. They also knew if you mentioned the one we shouldn't mention, the spitter, whoop, out of the synagogue. It was in the membership guidelines. Now the parents then say, well, why don't you ask our previously blind son? He's 23, he can speak for himself. Back to the town square, they bring the man in, the 23-year-old previously blind, possible sinner, and say, all right, mister, you got to tell the truth. If you do, God will receive the glory because we all know this spitter's a sinner. So the man, on his first day, seeing the sights, the hills, the sun, the beauty in the world, he gets called back in. He's a little prickly. He says, I don't know if he's a sinner. That's up for you educated people to figure out. This I know, I was blind, now I see. Simple blind, not blind. And the Pharisees say, what did he do? How did this happen? And the man said, what, you weren't listening the last time? I told this story already. What with the spit and the mud, the seeing, you bring me in here. I was seeing the sights, the hills, the sun, the beauty in the world. I got to be here telling you to these people again. Yeah, he was prickly. You need to hear this again. Oh, you do? Do you want to become his disciple too? Ha! Do you want to become his disciple? And the Pharisees, oh, they were pissed. Oh, they insult the man. They harangue the man. They say, no, it's you who are the disciple. We are the disciples of Moses. But this man, this healing spitter, as for him, we don't know where he comes from. And the man says, oh, that's remarkable. Interesting. You don't know where he comes from. Now, I'm just a previously blind man. But as you say, God doesn't listen to sinners. He only listens to those who do his will. Am I going too fast for you? He says. Yeah, he was prickly. He said, no one has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind, yet he did. If he were not from God, he could do nothing. Yeah, prickly, but articulate. So the leaders, they rose to their highest levels of indignation, and they say, you who are steeped in sin since birth, you dare lecture us? And they threw him out. Membership guidelines. So Jesus, he goes and finds the man and asks, do you believe in the Son of Man? And the man says, oh, who is that? And Jesus says, with a chuckle, you have seen him. Interesting play on words. He's the one speaking to you. And the man said, oh, yes, I believe. And Jesus said, for judgment, I've come into this world so that the blind will see and those who see will become blind. But some of the Pharisees who always seem to be hanging around, they say to him, he said this, what, are we blind? And Jesus said, look, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see,
What do you mean?
just,
There's a world falling apart up here. We have to work together.
Who are you?
I'm Deborah.
Do you have a song for us?
I do have a song. Awake, troops. Awake to the world around you. We are dying. We are falling one by one from our hives. But we can return. Gather wherever we can. Gather in Antarctica, Brazil, our island. Offer yourselves at the feet of the bees. Sing for salvation. Save beauty. Save wisdom. Save sustenance. The rain pours down. The mountains split apart. We flew from petal to petal, tree to tree, but now we're kept in boxes, trucked down the road in the dark from one almond tree to the next. Rise up. We drink honey. We drink the mead. They give us Caro syrup and we grow fat and sullen. Our buzz becomes a hum, a solitary faint trickle of the roars we used to give. We lie on couches, too lazy to throw out our dead, collecting around our little bee ankles. The rulers of today look the other way. Artificial sweeteners won't grow the potatoes. We must take up arms. We must spread the news far and wide. Those of you on the roofs of New York City, those of you in the meadows of Vermont, those of you given minutes of freedom from the California trucks, sing at the river, tell of our triumphs. Tell how we saved the eggplants, the peonies. Tell how we put food on their table. If they want war, we can give them war. We rise up armed only with ourselves and our ability to fly away. A honeybee strike. Come together. Fly to New Zealand, Australia. Follow me. Follow our ancestors. Do not tarry. Search your hearts. Gilead stayed behind to watch the tomato farm. Dan flew out to sea and never returned. Naphtali told jokes, looked the other way in denial. Zebulun flew up, no return. We will work and we will see no reward but the continued existence of the world. The stars will continue to shine, the floods will continue to rise, we will stay the course. Those who stay behind and refuse to help will die in their souls, in their hearts, and in their bodies. There will be no more squash or tulips. Come back to the world of touch, we say, the world of misshapen, juicy tomatoes. Stop eating cardboard, engage with the world. See the beauty, hear the hooves of time. They have found workarounds with their trucks and pesticides, chemical engineering looking the other way as we perish. But they will perish as we perish, and we will turn to the sun. We fly onward. Pack your bags. We will go where we can be free. We will rest for 40 years.
It was a slow day that day. It was hot. And some masters of the law were there, and they say to him, Jesus, teacher. See, they didn't think he was really their teacher. They say to him, teacher, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus, he pops one eye open and he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and this is the kicker, love your neighbor as yourself. You do this, everything else, you hang on that. You think we're done here, but no. Teachers of the law, always with the follow-up questions. They say, so, teacher, who's my neighbor? Now, Jesus, you got to tell another parable. The disciples, they say, what, again with the parables? You can't just tell us? And Jesus says, Remember, a teaching goes in here, rattles around out the other side, but a story sticks. Story goes like this. A man is on a journey from Jericho down to Jerusalem. Tough road, Jericho to Jerusalem. He gets robbed. What a surprise. Knock on the noggin, take the purse, left for dead. Left for dead, not dead. Two men walk by, a priest and a Levite. They don't help. Go figure. Tough crowd, the religious folk. See, you spend all of your life stuffing rules and laws into your head, what you can do, what you can't do. There isn't room for nothing else. I call that moral constipation. A lot of stuff goes in, nothing comes out. Another man walks by. He's a Samaritan. See, we're not supposed to associate with the Samaritans. So what does he do? He helps the man. Binds up his wounds, puts him on the donkey, schleps him off to the doctor, pays the doctor, the whole thing, bing, bang, boom. What do you think? So Jesus says, who's the neighbor? It wasn't a tough question. Everyone there says, the man who helped was the neighbor. And Jesus says, okay, there you go. Typical. Tell a story, you figure it out. Why did those religious leaders not stop to help? Now, it might be true that they might have been suffering from deep moral constipation. They also might have been afraid. It's always a risk to help. It's always a risk to say, tell me your story. It's always a risk to say, have a seat, because then we're connected. Those people, now those stories start to become our stories. Yeah. Love your neighbor. Not every story is quite so simple. Who's my neighbor? That's the trick, isn't it? We keep asking, who's my neighbor? Maybe we should be asking, who isn't my neighbor?
So before I tell this next story, I need to catch you up because it starts in the middle. We talked about in the middle. The things you need to know are that I had never been to the Badlands, and just as a question, how many of you have been to the Badlands in South Dakota, the South Dakota ones? Some of you. So I had gone there with an ex-boyfriend as we were heading west, and he wanted to keep moving. I had never seen them before. I wanted to stop, and he said no. He was driving, so we kept going. So some years later, when I was by myself, I said, I am planning my whole trip around going to see the Badlands. I want to spend a day there. I know I have a job that I have to get to in Portland, but I'm gonna stop and see the Badlands. And I was staying with a couple people who are gonna be mentioned, Bonnie and Dallas, and they were kind of friends of friends, didn't really know them that well. But I was staying there. I had this day set aside to go see the Badlands, and my car wouldn't start. Side note, my car was a 1990 Honda Civic, but it was running really well. So my car didn't start. I had one day to go, and they said, why don't you take our car? And it was sort of last minute, and I thought, well, everyone says getting to the Badlands at the end of the day is the best time to see it. So I took off, was driving there. I thought, I'll buy the day pass. It's fine. I'll be there for an hour. It's fine. Got out. I was taking some pictures, and I turned around, and the car had somehow locked. So we're at like 5 p.m., 5:30 p.m. It's getting towards dusk. Forget what time. This must have been August. And it's hot, and I know that the Badlands are named the Badlands for a reason. There's, snakes, mountain lions. It's getting cold. It's getting dark. My keys are in someone else's car with my phone. Did I miss anything?
That's pretty dire.
Yeah. So, the middle of the Badlands, wind picking up, rain on the way, dark is coming on fast. Keys and phone are in the car. I am not. I am at the edge of the road near a small cliff, in shorts and sandals, at least 10 miles from a park ranger, 20 miles from the edge of the park. But I had been noticing over the past few days these groups of bikers everywhere, sometimes coming out of nowhere, hordes of them. I learned that this thing called Sturgis is happening, drawing bikers to South Dakota every year. As I stand looking at my car, my focus zoomed in on the door I can't open, I remember that a group of them had been taking photos by the vista not too far from me. They're just about to leave. A woman who had smiled at me earlier walks by, and I hear myself saying out loud, somewhat bewildered, I just locked my keys in the car. Within seconds, she's in action. Hey, she calls out to her friend over by their bikes, bring me some bungee cords. She's noticed something that I did not. One of the back windows is cracked open. Just slightly open, just a couple of inches, but it is open. Immediately, both women are next to the car, discussing the relative merits of one size of bungee cord over another. Soon, more of their friends have joined us. We have short bungee cords, long ones, bungee cords with metal hooks, plastic hooks, small hooks, large hooks, lots of bungee cords. My first friend has put one into the window, swinging it towards the little plastic lock below, a rounded lock. Nothing really to hold on to, but she's trying. Someone suggests swinging the bungee cord up into the front seat, but it doesn't reach. Now there are 3 or 4 people working to wrap several bungee cords together so that they don't fall apart, making a long snake of green, black, plastic, metal. Duct tape appears. Don't want to lose a bungee cord into the abyss of the Ford. And the bungees are linked and taped. We aren't sure the cords will reach the locks. I suggest aiming for the keys instead. Could we snag them off the seat? We wrap the end of the last cord with duct tape inside out to stick it to the keys, slide the ropes in through the window. But the seat belt is in the way. Because my arm is the narrowest, I am nominated to reach into the car to overcome the seat belt obstacle. Now my arm may be narrow, but my body is short. A man flings his arms around my waist, lifts me up, and urges me on. Slowly, slowly, he says, as I inch the bungee over the seat. I get it over the seat, but I can't leverage it to swing it forward. Now my arm needs to be both narrow and long, a feat I can't quite pull off. We back out and regroup. One woman notices a keypad by the door. She asks me if I can remember the code. Ah, I say, this isn't my car. They look befuddled. Kenny, the man who had held me up to reach the window, keeps bemoaning the fact that no one has a coat hanger. This, it seems, would be the miracle solution. While we brainstorm various ideas, several of the bikers are flagging down every car or van or motorcycle that passes, asking if they possibly have a coat hanger. Be nice, they remind each other. Everyone's going to think we're trying to break into a car. We are trying to break into a car, I say. One of the bikers rides off, promising to return with either a coat hanger or a park ranger. Another woman is punching every combination of numbers she can come up with into the buttons on the car door. Do you know any dates that are special to these people, she asks me. I have no idea. What was your factory setting code when you got yours, one man calls out. Maybe they're all the same. Hold on, a woman answers, I'm looking it up. Someone asks if I could call the owners of the car, but I don't know their phone number. Their number is in my phone in the car. But then I remember I could call one of the only phone numbers I still have memorized, my parents' landline. They might be able to look up Dallas and Bonnie's number. I'm handed one cell phone after another, trying to get a call through, but none of them have service. A man who stopped to take photos and decidedly did not have a coat hanger comes over to us with a hopeful look on his face. "I'm sorry, my English isn't very good, so I hope you can understand me," he says. I have a telescoping tripod. That might help." Everyone is impressed. His tripod would be long enough to reach the keys, but turns out it's too wide to fit through that narrow crack in the window. "But hey," a woman says, "we have a tripod. Why didn't we think of that?" She runs to one of the bikes and pulls out a somewhat shorter but narrower tripod. Kenny tries reaching it through the window towards the front lock, and then towards the latch, and then towards the passenger side, everyone offering suggestions and encouragement, but it won't go far enough. Keeps getting caught on the window where the three legs of the tripod join before it can reach the lock or the keys. We joke that maybe they could all lift the car up and tip the keys back towards Kenny and the tripod. For a moment, it seems like an almost reasonable idea. I ask if the whole tripod would go through the window so I could reach further. "Well, sure," he says, "but my arm won't." "Mine will," I remind him. He looks at me. "If you drop it, we're done here." "Got it," I say. "I won't let it go." He sizes me up, decides to trust me. A woman kneels and says, "Here, step up." As I step up onto her knees, Kenny lifts me again, balancing me against the car. I reach slowly through the narrow opening, inching the tripod towards the seat. The others are directing me. "A little higher. Okay, a bit to the left." "It's like one of those machines where you try to get your favorite animals, like a claw," one of them laughs. I try to push on the unlock button, barely touching it with the tripod, holding my breath. Everyone's holding their breath with me. But I can't push down. Again, I can't get leverage. "Well, what about snagging the keys?" someone asks. I'm able to nudge the keys towards us a bit, which seems exciting for a moment, but then we realize the keys are now even harder to reach. They're at an awkward angle to hook with the tripod. Everyone steps back again, thinking hard. And I'm wondering, am I going to end up staying here all night with the wind and the rain and the snakes and the mountain lions freezing to death in my shorts and my sandals? Or will I walk pitifully back down the steep road the 10 miles to the ranger station as night falls? "We won't leave you here," a woman tells me firmly. I believe her. Suddenly, Kenny has another idea. He duct tapes a small bungee cord to the end of the tripod. Now that the keys are closer, he might be able to reach them with the hook. 3 people are on opposite sides of the car calling out instructions. "Slowly. That's it, lower, just a little lower. Stop, now, yes." Through the shadow of the windshield, I see the silhouette of the keys slowly rising, dangling from Kenny's makeshift fishing line. "Okay," he says to me, his eyes still on the keys. "It's your turn." He holds the tripod bungee hook thing steady as I reach up, no extra lifting help this time, through the window. What if I lose my balance and I knock the keys off? What if they fall to the floor and down in a crack and we can't find them again? What if I completely blow this? I reach in slowly. Kenny's holding steady. I touch the keys. I hold my breath. I fold my hand around the keys. I bring my hand out of the window. Everything erupts. I'm hugging Kenny. I'm jumping up and down. Everyone is cheering, laughing, patting each other on the back. "She's trembling," someone laughs. "You saved my life," I say. "Tell everyone bikers are nice people," a woman says. "Oh, I will," I say. "I would have anyway." We take a group photo, and then Kenny and I take one together, proudly displaying the winning contraption. As I drive away, they wave and cheer. And then for the next 10 miles, I'm laughing and crying, exhilarated, shaking, thrilled to be headed back to US 90, back to Bonnie and Dallas and safety. But first, I watch the sunset over the Badlands. I'm there just in time for the most beautiful part of the day.
So not every story is quite so simple. Who's my neighbor?
Who's my neighbor?
My neighbor.
Mustard seed? Mustard seed. What'll it grow into? What'll it grow into?
That's the trick, isn't it? We keep asking,
Walking along the edges.
who is my neighbor?
Who is my neighbor?
Maybe the better question is, who isn't? Thank you. I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your attention and your laughter. This evening we are doing a show called We Own This Now, which is a show that we are very excited to bring back to Kansas. It has a Kansas setting. I think that you will learn something and you will be entertained in a way that maybe surprises you. Mm-hmm. So 7 o'clock tonight in the same space here. You don't have to sit in the same seat. Thank you.
Thank you.